Good morning. I hope everything's going great in your life today and that you're going to have a wonderful day and a great week to follow. I want to think with you today about a passage in the book of First Peter. It's an intriguing one to me, one that fits a lot of things that are said in First Peter. But look down at chapter 3, beginning in verse number 8. Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil for evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you might inherit a blessing. It's an amazing statement, it seems to me. Peter loves that idea of our being called for a particular purpose. And he's talked about how we're called to follow Jesus back in chapter 2. And in this chapter he makes this point that we are to be a certain kind of people as the children of God. That we have a calling from God to live a particular kind of life. And if I'm going in that opposite direction and not living that life, I'm failing the calling that I have from the Lord. Sometimes we talk about preachers being called to preach the gospel, but the idea of a calling goes a lot deeper than just that. As a matter of fact, every Christian is called in a way to live the godly life, to follow Jesus, to be the person he wants us to be. But God gives each of us a particular plan, a gift, if you will, that he wants us to carry out in our lives. And we need to fulfill that calling before our God. The reality is, I will never feel full and complete in my service to God until I have fulfilled that calling of the Lord. You know, you think about in Romans 12 when Paul is listing the different kinds of gifts that God has given to people. And he talks about ministry and encouragement. And he talks about prophecy. He talks about an evangelist. He talks about giving, showing mercy, being a leader. All those things were mentioned as gifts from God. They are callings from the Lord. And I need to be one that fulfills my calling with my God. Think about the elements of this particular passage. Finally, and I've always been intrigued with that word finally. How many times it'll happen in the middle of a book, long before the end of it, and it does here in 1 Peter 3. He's about halfway through, but he already is saying finally. It's sort of like the preacher preaching his sermon, and he says finally, and then he goes on for another 30 or 40 minutes with the sermon. Well, Peter says finally, maybe because it's so important, all of you be like-minded. We have that same heart, that same mind, that same attitude in service unto our God. We're challenged by Paul in Philippians 2 and 5 to have the mind of Christ, or the attitude of Christ. And so we're to be like-minded. We are to be ones that are sympathetic and love one another. What does it mean to be sympathetic? It's that idea of putting myself in the place of another and trying to see things from their point of view, trying to understand things from the way that they would see it and feel it. And so he said, I want you to be sympathetic. I want you to feel with the other person and strive to understand where they're coming from. I want you to be the ones that are compassionate and humble. Compassion means to demonstrate mercy and kindness and love toward the other individual. I am to reach out with that compassion for those around me, and I am to be humble, where I'm not trying to elevate self, I'm elevating the Lord and trying to see self as that servant of the Lord. And then Peter says, don't repay evil for evil or insult with insults. Repay it with a blessing. Every one of us are going to get hurt at times. And I can respond to that hurt by reaching out and trying to hurt the other person, just like they've hurt me. Or I can respond with a blessing from God that might solve the whole thing. Peter said, let me tell you something, folks. You are all called to live this kind of life. It may not be that special calling that I have in service unto God, but every Christian is called to live this kind of life, to be that person that God longs for us to be. Are you fulfilling your calling?